October 14th, 1943, 9:15 a.m. The War Office, Whitehall, London. Room 312. The room is choked with cigar smoke and the heavy silence of men who have run out of options. On the large oak table lies a map of the French coastline. It is covered in red ink. Cherbourg, Le Havre, Calais, Dunkirk, every major port is circled in red, marking the heavy fortifications of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Major General D.J. McMullen stares at the map with tired eyes. He knows the math. To sustain an invasion force of 2 million men, the Allies need to land 12,000 tons of supplies per day. To do that, they need cranes, deep water and calm docks. They need a port. But the disastrous raid on Dieppe a year earlier proved a bloody lesson. You cannot capture a port intact. The Germans will demolish the wharves and mine the harbours before the first Allied boot hits the sand. We have the ships, we have the men, we have the tanks, McMullen says, his voice gravelly. But without a harbour, they will starve on the beaches in 3 days. Standing in the back of the room, looking uncomfortable in an ill-fitting uniform, is Alan Beckett. Technically, he is a Royal Engineer now. But in his heart, and in the way he looks at a problem, he is still a civilian civil engineer. He doesn't see objectives or flanks. He sees load limits, torque and shear stress. He is a bridge builder in a room full of destroyers. The Prime Minister's memo is quite clear, a naval officer says, tapping a piece of paper signed by Winston Churchill. Piers for use on beaches. They must float up and down with the tide. Don't argue the matter. The difficulties will argue for themselves. The room grumbles. The English Channel has a tidal range of 24 feet. It has waves that can snap a destroyer's keel. Churchill wants them to build a floating city, tow it across 100 miles of hostile ocean, and anchor it on a sandy beach under artillery fire. It isn't difficult. It's physics-defying. It can't be rigid, Beckett speaks up. The heads turn. The naval officers look at him with scepticism. To the Navy, strength means rigidity. Battleships are rigid. Seawalls are rigid. "Excuse me, Captain," an admiral asks, eyebrows raised. Beckett steps forward to the chalkboard. He picks up a piece of chalk. He doesn't draw a formation. He draws a wave. "The channel isn't a flat surface, sir. It's a twisting, heaving beast," Beckett says, his civilian tone cutting through the military protocol. "If you build a rigid steel bridge from the ships to the shore, the first swell will twist it until it snaps. The torque will shear the rivets." He draws a new line, a series of connected segments like a spine. "The roadway has to breathe," Beckett says, sketching rapidly. "It has to twist. We don't fight the sea, we move with it. We need a bridge that floats on pontoons connected by telescopic spans that can rotate in 3 dimensions simultaneously." "A bridge that wobbles?" The Admiral scoffs. "You want to drive 40-ton Sherman tanks over a bridge that wobbles?" "I want to drive them over a bridge that doesn't break," Beckett counters. "If we make it stiff, the sea breaks it. If we make it flexible, the sea passes under it." The room is silent. The idea is radical. It goes against centuries of maritime engineering. It sounds like a circus ride, not a military pier. McMullen looks at the drawing. He looks at the civilian engineer who dares to lecture the Navy on hydrodynamics. "You have 6 weeks to prove it, Beckett," McMullen says, extinguishing his cigarette. "We're setting up a testing ground in Scotland. If your wobbly bridge fails, we cancel the invasion." Beckett looks at the chalk drawing. He knows the theory is sound, but theory is calm. The North Atlantic is not. December 2nd, 1943, 11 p.m. The Directorate of Transportation, London. The office is freezing. Coal is rationed, and the blackout curtains trap the stale air of too many cigarettes and too little sleep. Alan Beckett is bent over a drafting table, his eyes burning. On the paper before him lies the blueprint for the impossible. They call it whale. It sounds like a beast, but on paper it looks like a fragile skeleton, a steel truss bridge 80 feet long sitting on a floating concrete pontoon called a beetle. The plan calls for hundreds of these spans to be linked together, forming a floating highway that stretches a mile from the deep ocean to the beach. "It's not the weight, sir," his assistant, Lieutenant Steer, says, looking at the calculations. "The steel can hold a 40-ton Churchill tank. That's easy. It's the twist. Beckett nods. He picks up a metal ruler and twists it. Torsion. This is the killer. In the middle of the English Channel, a wave might lift the left side of a pontoon while the right side drops into a trough. If the bridge spans are bolted together rigidly, that twisting force will tear the steel apart like taffy. Beckett closes his eyes. He imagines the sea. He imagines the violence of a force 6 gale. The bridge can't just float. It has to articulate. It has to move like a snake, not a stick. "We need a joint," Beckett mutters, sketching furiously on a scrap of paper. "Not a hinge. A hinge only moves up and down. We need something that allows the bridge to corkscrew." He draws a heavy steel pin, but surrounds it with a spherical bearing, a ball and socket joint, massive enough to hold a tank, but loose enough to rotate. "Loose?" Steer asks, frowning. "The Navy won't like loose. They want dreadnoughts, not necklaces." "The Navy isn't driving the tanks," Beckett snaps, tapping the drawing. "If this joint locks up, the roadway snaps. If it snaps, the invasion stops. It has to be able to twist 40 degrees without failing." January 15th, 1944. Manufacturing Depot, Southampton. The noise is deafening. Sparks shower from the rafters as welders race to build the first prototype links. Beckett walks the line, inspecting the steel. It looks chaotic. To a traditional eye, the Whale roadway looks under-engineered. The trusses seem too thin. The connections seem too flexible. A commander from the Admiralty, inspecting the progress, stops in front of a Beetle pontoon. It's a concrete barge, ugly and squat. "This is your grand solution, Beckett?" the commander asks, kicking the concrete. "Concrete boats and loose bridges? You expect a Sherman tank driver to trust this? It looks like a fairground ride." Beckett runs a hand over the cold steel of the truss. "It's designed to survive a storm, Commander, not a parade." "It had better," the commander warns, "because the Americans are bringing their own design to the trials next week. They're using heavy steel girders, rigid, strong. The way a bridge should be built." Beckett feels a knot of anxiety in his stomach. The Americans have unlimited steel. They have the resources to build massive, heavy structures. If they bring a rigid bridge to the contest, it will look safer. It will feel solid. The generals will love it. But Beckett knows the ocean. He knows spars that when an immovable object meets an irresistible force, the object breaks. "Let them bring their steel," Beckett says quietly. "The sea doesn't care about rank, and it doesn't care about American steel. It only respects physics." He turns to the foreman. "Pack it up. We're going to Scotland." February 4th, 1944. 8:30 a.m. Wigtown Bay, Garliston, Scotland. They call this place the Washing Machine. It is a remote, bleak inlet on the southwest coast of Scotland, chosen for one specific reason. The tides here are violent, unpredictable, and remarkably similar to the coast of Normandy. The wind is howling at 40 knots, driving rain sideways that stings like buckshot. Standing on the muddy bluff overlooking the bay, a group of high-ranking officers huddle in their trench coats, binoculars pressed to their eyes. Below them, jutting out into the churning grey water, are the contenders. On the left is the American entry. It is a beast of engineering, heavy steel girders, rigid connections, massive pontoons. It looks like a railroad bridge that simply decided to go for a swim. It sits high and proud, defiant against the waves. On the right is Beckett's Whale. Compared to the American Leviathan, it looks spindly. It sits low in the water. As the waves roll in, the roadway undulates. It rises, falls, and twists. "It looks like a damn roller coaster," an American colonel mutters, shaking his head. "You expect a driver to take a truck over that while he's seasick? He'll throw up his rations before he gets halfway to the beach." Beckett stands apart from the brass, his hands jammed deep in his pockets to keep them from shaking. He isn't cold. He's terrified. This isn't a lab simulation. This is the Atlantic Ocean. "The forecast says it's going to get worse, sir," Lieutenant Steer shouts over the wind. "Force 8 gale by noon." "Good," Beckett says, though his stomach turns over. "We need the worst. If it breaks here, nobody dies. If it breaks in France, we lose the war." 1:45 p.m. The storm peaks. The gale slams into the bay with the force of a sledgehammer. The waves aren't just rolling anymore, they are crashing, confused mountains of water smashing into the steel structures. The officers retreat to the shelter of the observation hut. wiping fogged glass to watch the destruction. The American pier is taking a beating. The waves hit the broad, flat sides of its rigid pontoons. Bang, bang, bang. The sound echoes even over the wind. Because the bridge is stiff, it fights every wave. It tries to hold its shape. "Look at the rivets," someone shouts. Through the binoculars, Beckett sees it. The connection plates on the American bridge are popping. The steel is screaming, a high-pitched shriek of metal being tortured beyond its yield point. The rigidity is its undoing. The ocean applies torque. The bridge refuses to twist, and so the bridge must break. With a thunderous crack, the centre span of the rigid bridge shears. It collapses into the sea, dragging the adjacent spans with it. In seconds, the proud engineering marvel is a twisted pile of scrap metal washing up on the rocks. Silence falls in the hut. All eyes turn to the whale. Beckett holds his breath. His bridge is dancing. It looks terrifying. As a 10-foot wave rolls under the first pontoon, the roadway corkscrews. The ball and socket joints, the ones the Navy laughed at, are working overtime. The bridge rotates 20 degrees to the left, rides the crest, and then rotates back as it slides into the trough. It is violent motion, but it is fluid. The energy of the wave isn't being absorbed by the steel. It is passing through it. It's riding it, General McMullen whispers. For 3 hours, the storm hammers the coast. The whale heaves and twists like a living thing. But when the tide finally recedes, the bridge is still there. Not a bolt is missing. Not a weld has cracked. Beckett finally exhales. He realises his jaw is aching from clenching his teeth. Brigadier Sir Bruce White, the Director of Ports, turns away from the window. He looks at the American officers, then at the wreckage of the rigid bridge, and finally at Beckett. "Well," White says, buttoning his coat, "I think the difficulties have argued for themselves." He walks over to Beckett. "You have your order, Captain. We need 10 miles of roadway, and we need it in 3 months. Beckett nods, staring out at his surviving bridge. He has won the argument. Now he has to build the impossible. March 20th, 1944, 10:15. AM East India Docks, London. The scale of the operation is no longer human. It is geological. Alan Beckett stands on the edge of a dry dock that once repaired ocean liners. Now it is filled with a single, monstrous object. It looks like a windowless apartment building made of grey concrete, 6 stories high and as long as a football field. This is a Phoenix caisson. It is the other half of the Mulberry equation. Beckett's floating whale roadways can handle the swell, but they cannot survive the open fury of the channel without protection. They need calm water. Since nature didn't provide a bay, the Allies are building one. These 6,000-ton concrete blocks are designed to be towed across the sea, flooded and sunk in a line to form an artificial reef, a breakwater that will kill the waves before they hit the piers. "It's ugly, sir," a foreman says, spitting into the murky water of the dock, "but it's big." "It needs to be big," Beckett replies, checking the towing lugs. "It has to stop the Atlantic Ocean. The entirety of southern England has been turned into a factory. From the Thames estuary to Southampton, 20,000 men are pouring concrete day and night. There isn't enough sand in the quarries, so they are dredging gravel from riverbeds. There isn't enough steel, so they are melting down park railings. But the sheer size of the phoenixes creates a terrifying problem: secrecy. You cannot hide a 6-story concrete block. You certainly cannot hide 100 of them. If a single Luftwaffe reconnaissance plane spots this armada of artificial islands gathering in the Solent, German intelligence will deduce the plan instantly. They will know the invasion is coming, and they will know it involves artificial ports. April the 15th, 1944. Selsey Bill, West Sussex. The solution to the secrecy problem is as audacious as the engineering itself. Beckett watches from a launch boat as a tug slowly manoeuvres a massive Phoenix caisson off the coast. The sun is bright, visibility is perfect. A German plane could spot this from 20 miles away. "Open the seacocks," the order comes over the radio. On the caisson, valves are turned. Water rushes into the hollow concrete chambers. The massive structure groans, lists slightly, and then begins to sink. It goes down, 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 until only the top few feet are visible above the waves. looking like nothing more than a navigation hazard or a wrecked barge. They are hiding the invasion fleet underwater. "Mark it on the chart," Beckett says to the skipper. "We'll need to pump it out in 6 weeks." "You sure they'll float again, sir?" the skipper asks dubiously. "That's a lot of concrete to lift." "It's just physics," Beckett says, though he crosses his fingers in his pocket. "Displacement. If we pump the water out, the air will bring them up." May 28th, 1944. Portsmouth Command Bunker. The deadline is here. The harbours are built. 2 complete ports. Mulberry A for the Americans at Omaha Beach. Mulberry B for the British at Gold Beach. The inventory list reads like a shopping list for giants. 146 Phoenix caissons, 600,000 tonnes of concrete, 10 miles of whale floating roadways, 23 spud pierheads, floating platforms that can jack themselves up on legs. Beckett looks at the assembly map. It is a logistical miracle. But now they face the final hurdle, the crossing. They have to tow these monsters 100 miles across the channel at a top speed of 4 miles per hour. They will be sitting ducks for E-boats, U-boats and coastal artillery, and once they arrive, they have to be assembled under fire. Beckett turns to Lieutenant Steer. The roadways are the most vulnerable. If the tugs go too fast, the drag will tear the towing shackles right out of the metal. "We've briefed the tug captain, sir," Steer says. "But you know the Navy. Once the shooting starts, they're going to want to sprint." "They can't sprint," Beckett says, his voice hard. "If they sprint, the bridge breaks. If the bridge breaks, the tanks don't land. Make sure they understand. The bridge dictates the speed, not the battle." Outside, the engines of 1,000 tugboats are idling. The air is thick with diesel smoke and destiny. The greatest construction project in military history is about to set sail. June 7th, 1944, D-Day 1, the English Channel. It is the strangest armada in naval history. Behind the destroyers and the troop transports, crawling at a painful 3 knots, comes the concrete fleet. Massive tugboats strain against the current, hauling the 6-story Phoenix caissons and the long floating trains of Beckett's whale roadways. From the deck of a lead tug, the invasion looks like a traffic jam. The sea is cluttered with wreckage, mines and bodies. But there is no time to stop. "Keep the tension steady," Beckett shouts through a megaphone. He watches the tow cable connecting the tug to a 400-foot section of floating bridge. The cable is singing tight. If it snaps, the bridge section will drift into the minefields. For 3 days they crawl across the grey water. June 10th, 1944. Gold Beach, Normandy. "Drop it here, now!" The command is barked over the radio. A Phoenix caisson, freshly pumped full of water, hisses as it sinks. It hits the seabed with a thud that vibrates through the hulls of nearby ships. Then another, then another. Under enemy artillery fire from the distant bluffs, the Royal Engineers are building a harbour from scratch. They line up the concrete blocks to form a breakwater. The water inside the perimeter calms instantly, protected from the chop. Then comes Beckett's moment. The whale roadways are towed into position. It is like threading a needle with a battleship. The floating spans must be connected to the shore and then linked backward, piece by piece, out to the deep-water spud piers. Click, lock, secure. The ball and socket joints slide into place. The roadway grows, a steel spine extending 3,000 feet out into the ocean. By June 15th, it is operational. The first trucks roll off the Liberty ships onto the pierhead and drive down Beckett's floating highway. They don't sink, they don't slide. They drive onto French soil at 25 miles per hour. General Eisenhower visits the beach. He sees a fully functioning port where, a week ago, there was only sand. "It's a miracle," he reportedly says. But the miracle is about to be tested. June 19th, 1944. The Great Storm. The sky turns a bruised, sickly purple. The barometer drops so fast the glass nearly cracks. Meteorologists call it a freak event, the worst summer gale in the English Channel in 40 years. The wind screams in from the northeast, generating waves 15 feet high. At Omaha Beach, Mulberry A, the American harbour takes the brunt of the weather. The Phoenix caissons, sitting on shifting sand, begin to scour. The waves undercut them. One by one, the 6,000-ton concrete blocks crack and topple. The breakwater fails. Without protection, the sea smashes into the American piers. The The rigid structures buckle. The ships moored inside the harbour are tossed like toys, smashing into the roadways. In 24 hours, the American harbour is reduced to twisted scrap. But at Gold Beach, Mulberry Bay, Alan Beckett is watching his creation fight for its life. The breakwater here holds better, but the waves still crash over the top, rolling into the harbour with terrifying force. The whale roadway is being thrashed. Beckett stands on the shore, soaked to the bone, binoculars pressed to his eyes. The bridge looks like it's possessed. As the massive swells roll under the pontoons, the roadway twists. It heaves up 10 feet, corkscrews to the right, slams down and twists back to the left. It looks impossible. It looks like the steel should shatter into shrapnel. "It's going to snap," a sergeant yells, shielding his face from the spray. "Nothing can take that torque." But Beckett watches the joints. The ball and socket bearings are rotating furiously. They are doing exactly what he drew on that chalkboard in London. They are shedding the energy. They are letting the bridge dance with the killer waves rather than fighting them. For 3 days, the storm rages. The wind howls like a banshee. The sea tries to destroy the invader. June 22nd, 1944. Dawn. The wind dies. The sun breaks through the tattered clouds. The devastation along the coast is absolute. Wrecked landing craft are piled high on the beach. The American harbour at Omaha is gone, completely destroyed. Beckett walks out onto the sand at Gold Beach. He looks at the water. The whale is still there. It is battered. Some of the concrete beetles are chipped, but the spine is unbroken. The roadway stretches out to the pierheads, floating serenely on the calming swell. A jeep engine roars to life behind him. A driver waves, shifts gears and drives his vehicle onto the ramp. He drives all the way out to a waiting ship, loads a crate of ammunition and drives back. Beckett touches the cold steel of the first span. It is still warm from the friction of the joints moving, but it held. The impossible bridge has survived the worst the Atlantic could throw at it. And because it survived, the road to Berlin remains open. June 23rd, 1944, 6 a.m. Mulberry Bay, Port Winston, Arromanches, France. The storm has passed, and in its wake comes the Iron River. The surviving harbour at Arromanches is no longer just a port. It is the busiest shipping terminal in the world. With the American harbour at Omaha destroyed, the entire weight of the Allied supply chain shifts to Beckett's flexible roadways. The scene is one of organised chaos. Liberty ships, deep in the water with cargo, moor at the spud pierheads. Cranes swing nets filled with 105mm howitzer shells, crates of plasma, and jerry cans of gasoline onto the waiting trucks. Then the trucks move. They form a continuous roaring line along the whale floating bridges. Day and night, the steel roadway rumbles under the weight. Drivers, who days ago were terrified of the wobbly bridge, now gun their engines, trusting the flexible spine to carry them over the swells. General Montgomery needs 3,000 tons of fuel a day to keep his tanks moving toward Caen. He gets it. General Bradley needs ammunition for the breakout at St. Lo. He gets it. Every bullet, every bandage, every tin of rations that feeds the liberation of Europe travels over the water, suspended on Alan Beckett's impossible ball and socket joints. August 1944. The breakout. As the Allied armies push out of Normandy and race toward Paris, the harbour at Arromanches works harder than ever. It was designed to last for 90 days. It has to last for 10 months. Beckett stays on site, monitoring the stress on the steel. He watches as the kite anchors, another one of his designs that dig into the sea but like ploughs, hold the massive structure against the currents. The engineering is being tested to destruction, yet it refuses to fail. By the time the port of Antwerp is finally captured and opened in late autumn, Port Winston has offloaded 2.5 million men, 500,000 vehicles, 4 million tons of supplies. It is a staggering statistical feat, but for Beckett, the numbers aren't what matters. One evening, he stands near the shore end of the roadway. An ambulance convoy is coming down the bridge from the pierhead, carrying wounded men from a hospital ship to the field hospitals on shore. The sea is choppy, but the ambulances don't pitch or roll. The flexible roadway absorbs the energy, keeping the deck relatively stable. The men inside, broken, bleeding, exhausted, are spared the agony of a rough boat ride through the surf. Beckett watches the red crosses paint stencilled on the canvas roofs pass by. He realises that his crazy idea isn't just feeding the war, it is saving the warriors. The legacy, the war, moves on. The Mulberry harbour eventually falls silent, its job done. The massive concrete Phoenix caissons are left to rot in the sea, becoming permanent reefs. The floating roadways are dismantled. Some spans are even repurposed to repair bombed-out bridges across France, helping civilians rebuild their lives. Hitler had spent 4 years building the Atlantic Wall, a rigid, immovable fortification of concrete and hate, designed to keep the world out. Alan Beckett, the civilian engineer who refused to listen to the Navy, built the opposite. He built a bridge that moved. He built a structure that didn't fight nature, but worked with it. And in doing so, he built the door that allowed freedom to return to Europe. Decades later, at low tide in Arromanches, the rusted skeletons of the Phoenix caissons still break the surface of the English Channel. They stand as ghostly sentinels in the mist. Tourists look at them and see concrete ruins, but engineers look at them and see the physical remnants of the most audacious gamble in military history, the time when a wobbly bridge carried the weight of the free world.